Something protective stirred in Rose's heart at the girl's poorly concealed disappointment. I'm sure His Grace had important matters that prevented his presence. The house has been prepared most carefully for your arrival. Priya said nothing, but her posture spoke volumes. The library proved to be the first thing that genuinely captured the girl's interest. 2 stories of leather-bound volumes, accessible by rolling ladders, filled the vast room. Priya moved through the space like someone coming home, trailing her fingers reverently over the spines. "My mother would have loved this room," she murmured, her voice suddenly small. Rose noticed the past tense. "Your mother enjoyed books." "She translated Sanskrit texts into English," Priya said proudly. "She taught at a ladies' college in Calcutta until she married my father. Then she taught me instead." Her face clouded. "She died last year." "Cholera." "I'm very sorry," Rose said sincerely. "I lost my parents when I was 16. I know how difficult it is." Priya regarded her with renewed interest. "Is that why you became a governess? Because you had no parents?" "Yes. I needed to support myself." "And do you like it, being responsible for other people's children?" The question was surprisingly perceptive. "I like helping young minds grow," Rose answered carefully. "Though I admit I've sometimes wished for more freedom." "Freedom," Priya repeated, testing the word. "My mother said English girls have very little freedom. That's why she stayed in India after marrying my father. She said in England, women are like birds in pretty cages." Rose couldn't deny the truth of it. Perhaps, but every cage has a door if one looks hard enough. "And have you found yours, Miss Kincaid?" The question struck uncomfortably close to Rose's private thoughts. "I'm working toward it," she said honestly. "Now shall we see your rooms? They've been specially prepared." That evening, after settling Priya for the night, Rose wrote her first letter to the Duke of Thornfield, detailing his ward's arrival and initial impressions. She kept the tone professional, but could not help adding, "Miss Thorne clearly feels her guardian's absence keenly. While I understand your Grace has pressing business, might I suggest that even a brief visit would do much to ease her transition to her new home." She hesitated before sending such a forward suggestion, but something about Priya's disappointed expression compelled her. The girl had lost her mother, been uprooted from her homeland, and arrived to find her guardian, her only living relative, absent. Surely even a duke could spare a day for such circumstances. Rose sealed the letter and gave it to Grave for the morning post, then retired to her rooms, wondering what manner of response it might provoke. The Duke's reply arrived 3 days later, delivered by a footman to the schoolroom where Rose was conducting Priya's first geography lesson. "His Grace's personal messenger brought it from London, miss," the footman explained, handing her a heavy envelope bearing the Thornfield seal. Rose set Priya to copying maps and broke the seal with trepidation. "Miss Kincaid," the letter began in that same bold handwriting she had seen in the schoolroom note. "I appreciate your detailed account of my ward's arrival and your initial assessment of her educational needs. Your observation regarding her disappointment in my absence is noted. Contrary to what you may believe, I do not neglect my duties willfully. Business matters of exceptional urgency required my presence in London. However, your concern for Priya's emotional well-being is commendable, if somewhat presumptuous from one so recently employed. You may inform my ward that I shall return to Thornfield Court within the fortnight. Until then, I trust you will continue to ease her transition with the same forthright concern you have demonstrated in your correspondence. Thornfield." Rose felt her cheeks warm. The Duke had clearly taken offense at her suggestion, yet he was acting upon it nonetheless. She folded the letter carefully, uncertain whether to feel chastised or vindicated. "Is it from my guardian?" Priya asked, looking up from her map. "Yes, His Grace writes that he will visit Thornfield within 2 weeks." Priya's face brightened momentarily, then settled into studied indifference. "I suppose he is very busy." "My father said Cousin Ravenel was the most responsible of men. Did your father speak of him often? Sometimes. He said the Duke saved our family from ruin after the old Duke died. Priya bent over her map again. Father also said cousin Ravenel had a heart of stone after his wife died. Rose tried to keep her expression neutral. Grief affects people differently. Did you know his wife drowned? Priya continued, apparently oblivious to the impropriety of such gossip. Father said it was very mysterious. She went swimming in the lake at their country house and never came back. Rose felt a chill. I think we should return to our lesson, Miss Thorne. Your guardian's personal history is not appropriate subject matter. Why not? In India, we speak openly about such things. England is different, Rose said firmly. Now, please identify the principal exports of the British colonies in the West Indies. The next 10 days fell into a rhythm as Rose assessed Priya's education. The girl was brilliantly intelligent, but woefully ignorant of the social graces expected of an English lady. She spoke 5 languages fluently, but could not execute a proper curtsy. She could solve complex mathematical equations, but was baffled by the rules of precedence at a dinner table. Why must I learn these things? She demanded one afternoon, throwing down her embroidery hoop in frustration. What does it matter whether the daughter of an earl outranks the wife of a baron? Because English society operates by these rules, Rose explained patiently. And one day you will be presented at court as the Duke's ward. Priya's expression darkened. I don't want to be presented at court. I want to go back to India. Rose set aside her own needlework and moved to sit beside the girl. I know this is difficult. Everything is strange and new. No one here understands, Priya said, her voice small. In Calcutta, I helped my mother with her translations. I attended lectures at the university. Here, I am just a child to be shaped into some English lady. Rose considered her words carefully. What if we make a compromise? We'll continue with the lessons in deportment and manners, but we'll also set aside time for your scholarly interests. The Duke specifically mentioned that he wanted your education to respect your unique upbringing. He did, Priya looked skeptical. Indeed. In fact, he personally selected many of the books in the schoolroom based on your interests. This seemed to surprise the girl. I assumed he didn't care what happened to me so long as I became properly English. I believe His Grace cares very much about your happiness, Rose said, though in truth, she had no idea what the Duke thought. His terse letter had revealed little of his character beyond an apparent dislike of presumption. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the entrance hall below. The clatter of carriage wheels on gravel, doors opening, voices raised in greeting. Grave appeared at the schoolroom door moments later. Miss Kincaid, His Grace has arrived and requests Miss Thorne's presence in the library immediately. Priya leapt up, then hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Do I look presentable? Rose quickly straightened the girl's collar and smoothed her hair. You look lovely. Remember your curtsy and speak clearly. They descended to the library, where the Duke of Thornfield stood before the fireplace, still in his travelling clothes. The journey had left him somewhat dishevelled, his dark hair windswept, his cravat slightly askew. The effect, Rose noted with surprise, made him seem more human than the imposing figure she had met in Lady Trenton's drawing-room. Your Grace, Rose curtsied deeply, may I present Miss Priya Thorne? Priya executed a creditable curtsy. Cousin Ravenel, she said, her voice smaller than usual. The Duke's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. Priya. Welcome to Thornfield. I apologize for not being present upon your arrival. Miss Kincaid said you had important business in London, Priya replied. The Duke's gaze flicked to Rose. Did she? Miss Kincaid is correct. Nevertheless, I should have been here to welcome you to your new home. An awkward silence fell. Priya stood stiffly, her hands clasped before her, while the Duke seemed at a loss for how to proceed with a child. Rose cleared her throat softly. Perhaps Miss Thorne might show your grace the progress she has made with her studies. She has completed a fascinating map of the trade routes between India and England. Gratitude flashed briefly in the Duke's eyes. I should like to see that very much. Priya brightened. I've marked the route our ship took from Calcutta, and I've been reading about the geological formations of the moors surrounding Thornfield. Have you indeed? The Duke gestured to a pair of chairs near the fire. Tell me what you've discovered. Rose moved to excuse herself, but the Duke stopped her with a raised hand. Stay, Miss Kincaid. I wish to hear your assessment of my ward's progress as well. For the next hour, the three engaged in conversation about Priya's education. The Duke proved surprisingly knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects, asking thoughtful questions that drew the girl out of her shell. By the time Grave announced dinner, Priya was chattering animatedly about her botanical observations of the Thornfield gardens. You'll dine with us tonight, Miss Kincaid, the Duke said as they rose. It was not a request. Dinner was served in the small family dining room rather than the grand formal hall. Rose sat stiffly, acutely aware of her plain governess dress amid the gleaming silver and crystal. The Duke, having changed from his travelling clothes, cut an imposing figure at the head of the table in his impeccably tailored evening wear. Conversation flowed more easily than Rose had expected. The Duke inquired about Priya's daily routine, her accommodations, her impressions of England. He listened attentively to her answers, occasionally asking for Rose's input on educational matters. Miss Kincaid has been teaching me about English customs, Priya informed him, though some seem very peculiar. Such as, the Duke prompted, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Well, the rules about when ladies may speak to gentlemen without being introduced, and why everyone pretends not to notice obvious things. Rose felt herself blush. I've explained that English society values discretion. Discretion is indeed valued, the Duke agreed, though I find many social conventions as arbitrary as you do, Priya. However, understanding them is necessary if one wishes to navigate society successfully. That's exactly what Miss Kincaid said, Priya remarked, sounding surprised to find her guardian and governess in agreement. After Priya was excused to prepare for bed, the Duke asked Rose to remain. I wish to hear your honest assessment of my ward's adjustment, he said, his expression serious. The child seems well enough, but I suspect she reveals more to you than to me. Rose chose her words carefully. Miss Thorne is remarkably resilient, but she feels the loss of her mother keenly, and she misses India, its climate, its customs, its intellectual openness. Intellectual openness. In India, she was encouraged to pursue scholarly interests that would be considered unusual for young ladies here. She fears being forced to abandon her studies in favor of more traditional feminine accomplishments. The Duke frowned. I have no desire to quash her intellect. My cousin married a remarkable woman by all accounts. I would dishonor her memory by forcing her daughter into a conventional mold. That is most enlightened, Your Grace. His mouth quirked slightly. You sound surprised, Miss Kincaid. Did you expect me to insist on transforming the girl into a mindless debutante? I made no assumptions about Your Grace's educational philosophy. Did you not? Your letter suggested otherwise. Rose felt her cheeks warm. I apologize if my concern for Miss Thorne's emotional well-being seemed presumptuous. It was presumptuous, he agreed mildly. Also correct, the child needed me and I was absent. The admission surprised her. Your business in London was important but could have waited a day. He studied her with those penetrating grey eyes. You're not afraid to speak your mind, are you, Miss Kincaid? I believe honesty is the foundation of proper education, Your Grace. A philosophy I share. Which is why I shall tell you honestly that while I appreciate your forthrightness, I expect to be informed of any concerns regarding my ward directly, not chastised in correspondence. Rose straightened her spine. I did not intend to chastise, merely to inform. Indeed, his eyebrow rose. Then you have a remarkable talent for pointed information, Miss Kincaid. Something in his tone made her bold. And you, Your Grace, have a remarkable talent for autocratic pronouncements. A startled silence fell between them. Rose immediately regretted her words. She had gone too far, surely. Lady Trenton's warning about the Duke's intolerance for impertinence echoed in her mind. To her astonishment, the Duke laughed, a short, rusty sound as though rarely used. "Tâchez, Miss Kincaid, I see Lady Trenton did not exaggerate your spirit." He rose from his chair. "We shall get along well enough, I think, provided we maintain this honesty between us." "Good night." "Good night, Your Grace." Rose curtsied, feeling strangely breathless, as though she had narrowly avoided some danger, or perhaps encountered a new one. Later that night, unable to sleep, Rose opened her window to the cool spring air. The moon illuminated the grounds in silver, casting long shadows across the formal gardens. Movement caught her eye, a solitary figure walking along the gravel path that led to the lake. Even from a distance, she recognized the Duke's tall form. He stopped at the water's edge, standing motionless for so long that Rose began to worry. Then, abruptly, he turned away, his posture rigid as he strode back toward the house. Rose closed her window, troubled by what she had witnessed. The lake, where his wife had drowned. What demons drove the Duke to visit that place in the dead of night? And why did the sight of his solitary figure stir such unexpected compassion in her heart? "Foolish thoughts," she murmured to herself. The Duke's private grief was none of her concern. Her duty was to his ward, nothing more. Yet as she finally drifted toward sleep, she could not banish the image of him standing alone in the moonlight, a man surrounded by wealth and privilege, yet seemingly isolated by some unspeakable burden. The Duke remained at Thornfield for a week, during which Rose observed him with growing curiosity. With Priya, he was patient and interested, if somewhat formal. With the servants, he was fair but distant. With his steward and solicitor, who visited twice, he was sharp and decisive. With Rose herself, he was perplexing. Sometimes he treated her with the detached courtesy one might show any employee. Other times, he engaged her in spirited debates about education, literature, or politics, seemingly forgetting the vast social gulf between them. One rainy afternoon, she encountered him in the library while searching for a book on Roman history. He sat in a window alcove, a volume open on his lap, staring out at the rain-swept gardens. "Forgive me, Your Grace," she said, curtsying. "I didn't mean to disturb you." He turned, and something in his expression, a fleeting vulnerability quickly masked, caught at her heart. "No disturbance, Miss Kincaid. I was merely woolgathering." He closed his book. "You're seeking something." "Gibbon's Decline and Fall." Miss Thorne expressed interest in Roman architecture. "Top shelf, third bookcase," he said immediately. "Though perhaps not all volumes are appropriate for a girl of 12. Rose smiled slightly. "I intended to select relevant chapters." He rose to retrieve the book, his height allowing him to reach it easily. As he handed it to her, their fingers brushed momentarily. A curious sensation, like a spark of static electricity, passed between them. "Thank you," she murmured, withdrawing her hand quickly. "You've done well with Priya," he said abruptly. "She seems happier than when I arrived. She merely needed time to adjust, and perhaps to be assured of Your Grace's interest in her welfare." "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I've arranged for a proper wardrobe for her. The dressmaker comes tomorrow. You should order some new gowns for yourself as well." Rose blinked in surprise. "I beg your pardon." "Your current attire is unnecessarily severe," he said matter-of-factly. "As my ward's companion, you'll occasionally accompany her to appropriate social functions. You should dress accordingly." "That is very generous, Your Grace, but—" It's not generosity, Miss Kincaid, merely practicality. His tone brooked no argument. Consider it part of your position's requirements. Good day. He strode from the library, leaving Rose clutching Gibbon's tome and feeling strangely off balance. The following morning, the dressmaker arrived from York with an assistant and trunks of fabric samples. Priya was delighted with the prospect of new clothes, though she argued passionately for designs that incorporated elements of her Indian heritage. Perhaps 1 or 2 gowns with such styling, Rose suggested diplomatically, and the rest more conventional for everyday wear. The dressmaker, Mrs. Potter, looked relieved at this compromise. We could use this blue silk for a traditional English day dress, she suggested, and this gold brocade for one with Eastern influences. When Priya's measurements and selections were complete, Mrs. Potter turned expectantly to Rose. Now for you, Miss Kincaid. His Grace specifically requested several gowns suitable for a lady's companion at country gatherings and informal dinners. Rose felt her face warm. Something simple, please. Dark colors, modest styling. Oh, but His Grace specifically mentioned that black was to be avoided, Mrs. Potter said cheerfully. He suggested deep greens or blues would be more flattering to your complexion. Priya giggled at Rose's discomfiture. Cousin Ravenel is right. You would look lovely in blue, Miss Kincaid. In the end, Rose capitulated, allowing herself to be measured for 3-day dresses in colors she would never have chosen for herself, and one evening gown of midnight blue silk that made her breath catch despite her determination to remain practical. Most becoming, Mrs. Potter declared when she held the fabric against Rose's skin. His Grace has a discerning eye. That evening at dinner, the Duke announced his imminent return to London. Business matters require my attention, he explained to a visibly disappointed Priya. But I shall return for your birthday next month, and you may write to me as often as you wish. Will you write back? The girl asked directly. Of course. And may I still study botany and mathematics, not just deportment and music? The Duke glanced at Rose. I trust Miss Kincaid to balance your education appropriately. She understands the value of both intellectual and social accomplishments. Later, after Priya had been sent to bed, the Duke asked Rose to join him in the library. He stood before the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. I've been corresponding with my solicitors regarding Priya's future, he said without preamble. As you know, she is my ward until her majority or marriage. Yes, Your Grace. What you may not know is that she brings a substantial fortune from her mother's family, Indian textile interests primarily. This makes her vulnerable to fortune hunters. Rose frowned. She is only 12. She will be 17 in the blink of an eye, he countered. I intend to protect her interests vigilantly. Which means I must also consider your position in this household. My position, Rose tensed. You have more influence over the child than I initially anticipated. She respects you, trusts you. He fixed her with that penetrating gaze. I need to know that trust is well placed. Rose lifted her chin. I have only Priya's best interests at heart. So you say, but I know nothing of you beyond Lady Trenton's recommendation. Your parents are deceased. You have no family connections of note, no fortune. His voice remained dispassionate, as though reciting a ledger. In short, Miss Kincaid, you are precisely the sort of person who might view a wealthy ward as an opportunity. Anger flared hot in Rose's chest. I am not a fortune hunter, Your Grace, nor am I a schemer. I am a governess who takes her responsibilities seriously. So Lady Trenton assured me, but I prefer to form my own judgments. He moved closer, his gaze never leaving her face. Tell me, Miss Kincaid, what do you want from life? What ambition drives you? The question was so unexpected that Rose answered honestly before she could consider the wisdom of it. Independence. I wish to save enough to someday purchase a small cottage and live on my own terms, beholden to no one. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, respect, before his expression shuttered again. A modest ambition. Perhaps to a duke, she replied evenly. To a woman with no family or connections, it represents freedom. Freedom, he repeated, his mouth quirking slightly. Priya used the same word. She said you understand the desire for it. I believe everyone wishes to determine their own fate, Your Grace. And yet we are all bound by duty and circumstance. He turned away, staring into the fire. You may continue as Priya's governess. I believe your influence is beneficial, but understand this. I will tolerate no interference with my plans for her future. What plans might those be? Rose asked carefully. When the time comes, an advantageous match with a man of suitable rank and character, a secure position in society, the life her birth entitles her to. And if that is not the life she desires? His expression hardened. Then she will learn, as we all must, that duty sometimes requires personal sacrifice. Rose wanted to argue, but knew she had already pushed the boundaries of propriety. As you say, Your Grace. I shall depart early tomorrow. In my absence, you may direct any concerns to Morris or write to me directly. He hesitated, then added, I meant what I said about your influence on Priya. The girl has lost too much. She needs stability. I understand. Do you? He studied her face. I wonder. Good night, Miss Kincaid. Rose curtsied and left the library, her thoughts in tumult. The Duke was a contradiction, cold one moment, almost kind the next. His concern for Priya seemed genuine, yet his plans for her future felt rigid, predetermined. And his assessment of Rose herself had been both accurate and dismissive. Independence, freedom. She had revealed more of her private dreams than she had intended. Somehow, the Duke had a way of provoking honesty even as he remained inscrutable himself. As she climbed the stairs to her chamber, Rose resolved to guard her thoughts more carefully in future. Thornfield Court was proving to be a place of unexpected currents, and the Duke of Thornfield himself, the most unpredictable element of all. The Duke departed as planned, and life at Thornfield settled into a pleasant routine. Spring advanced across the moors, bringing wildflowers and milder weather. Priya thrived under Rose's tutelage, excelling in both her scholarly pursuits and with somewhat less enthusiasm the social graces required of a young lady. The new wardrobe arrived, transforming both pupil and governess. Rose could scarcely recognize herself in the looking-glass when she donned the midnight blue silk gown for the first time. The color made her eyes appear almost violet, her skin luminous. The cut, while modest, flattered her figure in a way her severe black gowns never had. You look beautiful, Priya declared when Rose modeled it for her. Like a princess in a fairy story. Rose laughed, though something in her chest ached strangely. Hardly that, but it is a lovely gown, I must admit. When will you wear it? There are no parties at Thornfield. Perhaps when your guardian returns for your birthday, Rose suggested, already unfastening the gown. Now, let's return to our geography lesson. The Duke's letters arrived regularly. Brief notes to Rose regarding Priya's education, longer letters to the child herself. Sometimes he enclosed small gifts, a book on Indian flora, a delicate bracelet, once a small telescope that had Priya squealing with delight. Rose found herself watching for these communications with more eagerness than was strictly proper. She told herself it was natural to be curious about her employer's thoughts. If sometimes her dreams featured grey eyes and a deep voice speaking words the Duke would never utter, well, dreams were not reality. On a warm June morning, as Rose and Priya sketched plants in the garden, a commotion at the front of the house drew their attention. A carriage had arrived, not the Duke's familiar conveyance, but a hired coach. From it emerged a woman of perhaps 40, fashionably dressed, with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Who is that?" Priya whispered. Before Rose could answer, Grave appeared in the garden. Miss Kincaid, Miss Thorne. Lady Harrington has arrived and requests your presence in the drawing room immediately. Lady Harrington, Rose asked, confused. His Grace's aunt, Grave explained, his expression carefully neutral. She says she has come to inspect Miss Thorne's progress. Rose exchanged glances with Priya, who looked suddenly apprehensive. Very well, we shall change and attend her directly. In her chamber, Rose hastily donned one of her new dresses, a deep green that the dressmaker had assured her was most becoming, and arranged her hair more carefully than usual. Something told her this unexpected visitor would be critical of any perceived shortcomings. Lady Harrington received them in the drawing room with cool assessment. So, she said, after cursory introductions, you are Sophia Thorne's daughter. You have her eyes, though little else. Priya stiffened. You knew my mother. We met when she visited England with your father, a very unusual woman. Lady Harrington's tone made the words sound like an insult. And you, Miss Kincaid, are the governess my nephew hired on Lady Trenton's recommendation. Yes, my lady. Lady Harrington surveyed her with undisguised skepticism. Rather young for such responsibility, aren't you? And very colourfully attired for a governess. Rose felt her cheeks warm. His Grace approved the wardrobe himself, my lady. Did he indeed? The lady's eyebrows rose. How interesting. Well, I shall be staying for a fortnight to observe Miss Thorne's progress. My nephew may be satisfied with reports, but I prefer to see for myself. We weren't informed of your visit, my lady, Rose said carefully. No, I decided quite suddenly. One hears such rumours, you understand, about the exotic ward and her unconventional education. Lady Harrington's smile was sharp. I felt it my duty to ensure things were being conducted properly. The days that followed were strained. Lady Harrington observed lessons, criticised Priya's posture and diction, questioned Rose's teaching methods, and generally made her disapproval evident. She seemed particularly disturbed by Priya's interest in science and mathematics. A gentleman wants a wife who can manage his household and bear his children, not recite the periodic table, she declared during one particularly tense luncheon. No man of quality will marry a bluestocking. Perhaps I don't wish to marry a man who values ignorance in his wife, Priya retorted, earning a shocked gasp from the lady and a warning glance from Rose. Impertinence, Lady Harrington turned her wrath on Rose. Is this how you allow the child to speak to her elders? No wonder my nephew has been so distracted lately. He entrusts his ward to a governess who encourages rebellion against the natural order. Priya, please apologize to Lady Harrington, Rose said firmly. While your opinion has merit, it was expressed disrespectfully. The girl grudgingly apologized, though her eyes flashed defiance. Later, Rose found Priya in the library, angrily flipping through a book on astronomy. She's horrid, the girl declared without looking up. I wish Cousin Ravenel would come back and send her away. Your guardian will return for your birthday in 2 weeks, Rose reminded her. Until then, we must be patient. She doesn't like you, Priya observed. I heard her telling Mrs. Fletcher that you're too pretty to be a proper governess. She said men don't hire pretty governesses unless they have dishonourable intentions. Rose felt her face flame. Lady Harrington should not discuss such matters within your hearing. Is it true about men and pretty governesses? Rose sighed. Sometimes unscrupulous men take advantage of women in dependent positions. But your guardian is an honourable man who hired me for my qualifications, not my appearance. Lady Harrington doesn't think so, she said. That's quite enough, Rose interrupted firmly. It is inappropriate for you to repeat gossip, especially regarding your guardian or myself. Priya subsided, but her expression remained troubled. That night, Rose wrote to the Duke, informing him of his aunt's unexpected arrival and her apparent disapproval of Priya's education. She kept her tone neutral, making no mention of Lady Harrington's insinuations about the Duke's motives in hiring her. The Duke's reply came with surprising swiftness. "Miss Kincaid, I had no knowledge of my aunt's planned visit. Lady Harrington has taken an unfortunate interest in my affairs since my father's death, believing herself entitled to a say in family matters despite having no actual authority. She is particularly concerned with appearances and conventional propriety. Do not alter Priya's education to appease her. I specifically selected you for your progressive views on female education. My aunt's opinions on the matter are irrelevant. I shall arrive 3 days earlier than planned to address this situation personally. Thornfield." Rose read the letter twice, relief washing over her. The Duke understood and supported her educational approach. Whatever Lady Harrington might insinuate, he had hired her for her qualifications, just as she had told Priya. Yet the lady's words had planted a seed of doubt. Rose was young, unmarried, not unattractive. The Duke had ordered her fashionable gowns, engaged her in private conversations, treated her with a courtesy beyond what most employers showed their governesses. Could there be truth to Lady Harrington's suspicions? Absurd, Rose muttered to herself. The Duke was one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in England. If he sought a mistress, he would hardly choose a penniless governess when beautiful, willing widows and actresses abounded in London. No, he had hired her for Priya's sake alone. The pretty gowns were merely to ensure his ward's companion appeared respectable in society. The private conversations were about Priya's welfare and education. Any other interpretation was pure fantasy or malicious gossip. Still, as she prepared for bed, Rose found herself wondering what the Duke would think of the green dress she wore now, and whether she should choose the blue silk for his arrival. Such vanity was beneath her, yet she could not quite banish the thought. The Duke arrived at Thornfield 3 days later, during a summer storm that had lashed the moors since dawn. He appeared in the library where Rose was conducting Priya's literature lesson, rainwater still glistening in his dark hair, his greatcoat damp from the journey. "Cousin Ravenel," Priya leapt up, propriety forgotten in her excitement. The Duke's stern expression softened as the girl rushed to greet him. "I see my aunt hasn't succeeded in transforming you into a proper English miss yet," he observed dryly, but his hand rested affectionately on Priya's head. Rose had risen and curtsied. "Welcome back, Your Grace. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "I hastened my departure from London when certain matters concluded earlier than anticipated." His eyes took in her appearance, the green dress that emphasized her slender waist, her hair arranged more elaborately than before. Something in his gaze made her feel both exposed and exhilarated. "You look different, Miss Kincaid." "The new wardrobe, Your Grace, as you instructed." "Indeed." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It suits you." Before Rose could respond, Lady Harrington swept into the library. "Ravenel, thank heaven you've arrived. This household requires your immediate attention." The warmth vanished from the Duke's face. "Aunt Catherine, I understand you've taken it upon yourself to visit Thornfield uninvited." Lady Harrington drew herself up. "Someone needed to ensure your ward was being properly raised." "The rumors in London." "What rumors?" he interrupted sharply. "About the girl's outlandish education, about your unusual interest in her governess." Lady Harrington cast a meaningful glance at Rose, who felt her cheeks burn with mortification. The Duke's expression turned dangerous. "You will refrain from spreading malicious gossip in my house, Aunt. Miss Kincaid is an exemplary governess whom I selected for her progressive educational philosophy. As for Priya's studies, they have my full approval." Progressive philosophy. The girl will be unmarriageable if... Enough. The single word, spoken quietly but with unmistakable authority, silenced Lady Harrington mid-sentence. "Priya, Miss Kincaid, please excuse us. My aunt and I have private matters to discuss." Rose led a reluctant Priya from the library, the Duke's cold anger still palpable in the air behind them. "Is Lady Harrington in trouble?" Priya asked as they climbed the stairs. "Your guardian seems displeased with her visit," Rose answered diplomatically. "Good, I hope he sends her away." Priya's expression turned thoughtful. "Miss Kincaid, do you think Cousin Ravenel has an unusual interest in you?" Rose nearly missed a step. "That is not an appropriate question, Priya." "But Lady Harrington thinks." "Lady Harrington is mistaken," Rose said firmly. "Now let's continue with Jane Eyre, while your guardian resolves matters with his aunt." Lady Harrington departed Thornfield the following morning, her expression thunderous as the footmen loaded her trunks onto the waiting carriage. The Duke saw her off with cold courtesy, then closeted himself with his steward for most of the day. That evening, he requested Rose's presence in the library after Priya had retired. She found him standing at the window, gazing out at the moonlit gardens, a glass of brandy in his hand. "You wish to see me, Your Grace?" He turned, his expression guarded. "Yes, I owe you an apology for my aunt's behavior. Her insinuations were inexcusable." "There's no need to apologize. Lady Harrington merely expressed concerns natural to a woman of her generation. Her concerns cast aspersions on your character and my honor." He set down his glass with more force than necessary. "I want to be perfectly clear, Miss Kincaid. I hired you for your qualifications alone. My interest in you extends only to your role as Priya's governess." The words were precisely what Rose had told herself, yet hearing them spoken aloud strung in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Of course, Your Grace, I never thought otherwise." He studied her face intently. "Good, because while I value your educational approach and your positive influence on my ward, I have no dishonorable intentions toward you." "I understand completely," Rose said, her voice steady despite the curious hollow feeling in her chest. "Is there anything else?" The Duke hesitated, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "The blue gown, for Priya's birthday celebration, it would be suitable." Rose curtsied, hiding her confusion at this unexpected shift in topic. "As you wish, Your Grace, good night." As she left the library, Rose chided herself for the foolish disappointment she felt. The Duke had merely clarified the professional nature of their relationship, exactly as she would have wished. Her position at Thornfield was secure, her role valued. The fact that her heart had harbored some unnamed hope was irrelevant. She was the governess, he was the Duke. The social gulf between them was unbridgeable. She had always known this, had never expected otherwise. So why did his words leave her feeling as though something precious had been lost before she even recognized its value? Priya's 13th birthday celebration brought guests to Thornfield for the first time since Rose's arrival. The neighboring gentry arrived in their carriages, curious to meet the Duke's exotic ward and to see what changes he had made to the long-neglected estate. Rose wore the midnight blue silk as instructed, her hair arranged by Lady Thornfield's ladies made in a style more elaborate than her usual chignon. Looking in the mirror, she scarcely recognized herself. The woman who gazed back seemed poised, elegant, a far cry from the plain governess who had arrived at Thornfield months earlier. "You look beautiful," Priya declared, when Rose came to inspect the girl's own birthday finery, a gown of pale gold silk with subtle Indian embroidery that honored her heritage while conforming to English fashion. "And you look like a princess," Rose replied sincerely. "Your mother will be proud to see you today." Priya's smile dimmed. "I wish she could be here." "She is watching over you," Rose said gently. "Just as my parents watch over me." The girl nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Do you think Cousin Ravenel will be pleased with how I look?" "He will be very proud," Rose assured her. "Now remember what we practiced. You'll greet each guest, thanking them for attending." The celebration proved more enjoyable than Rose had anticipated. The neighbors were curious but kind, clearly charmed by Priya's intelligence and exotic background. The Duke himself was an attentive host, introducing his ward with evident pride, ensuring she was comfortable amid the unaccustomed attention. Rose remained in the background, as befit her position, observing Priya's social debut with satisfaction. The girl conducted herself admirably, displaying both the poise of an English lady and the quiet confidence of her mother's heritage. "Miss Kincaid," the Duke's voice behind her made Rose turn, "you're not enjoying the refreshments." "I'm quite content observing, Your Grace. Priya is the center of attention today, as she should be." His gaze swept over her, the blue silk, the elegant coiffure, the single strand of pearls that had been her mother's. "You do her credit. The guests have remarked on her exceptional manners and conversation. She is an exceptional girl. Due in no small part to your guidance," he hesitated. "Would you honor me with a dance? The musicians are about to begin." Rose stared at him in surprise. "Your Grace, I'm merely the governess. You are my ward's companion, and the person most responsible for her successful debut today. A dance seems appropriate recognition." Before she could protest further, he had taken her hand and led her to the center of the room where other couples were assembling for a country dance. Whispers followed them, but the Duke appeared oblivious to the sensation they created. The dance brought them together, then apart, their hands touching briefly before the patterns separated them again. Each time they passed, Rose felt the weight of his gaze, the strange tension that seemed to exist between them despite her determination to maintain professional distance. "You dance well," he observed during one such passing. "My mother insisted I learn. She believed accomplishments were important regardless of circumstances." "A wise woman." His hand clasped hers again as they circled. "You remind me of her. In some ways, she had more courage than I." "I find that difficult to believe," he said quietly. "Few governesses would have stood up to my aunt as you did." The dance ended before Rose could formulate a response. The Duke bowed formally, then was immediately claimed by Lady Pembroke, the most prominent neighbor, for the next set. Rose retreated to the edge of the ballroom, her heart beating uncomfortably fast. The Duke had singled her out, danced with her before all his guests. Whatever his intentions, mere kindness, perhaps, or gratitude for her work with Priya, the gesture would fuel gossip. Lady Harrington's insinuations would seem validated. As if conjured by her thoughts, Mrs. Pembroke's daughter, a girl of perhaps 17, appeared beside her. "You're Miss Kincaid." "Priya's governess." "Yes, Miss Pembroke." The girl leaned closer, her expression avid. "Is it true that the Duke hired you after meeting you just once? Mamma says it's most irregular." "Lady Trenton recommended me to His Grace," Rose replied evenly. "My qualifications were thoroughly reviewed." "Oh," the girl sounded disappointed. "Only, there are such rumors in London about why the Duke suddenly acquired a ward and installed her at Thornfield with a young, pretty governess. Some say—" "Amelia," Lady Pembroke appeared, her expression mortified. "You will excuse my daughter, Miss Kincaid. She speaks without thinking." As the woman led her chastened daughter away, Rose felt ill. Rumors in London. The Duke's reputation questioned because of her presence in his household. No wonder Lady Harrington had descended upon Thornfield so precipitously. The celebration continued around her, but Rose's enjoyment had vanished. She watched the Duke dancing, conversing, playing the attentive host, and wondered if he knew what people said about him, about them. His reputation was beyond reproach. He was too powerful, too wealthy to be truly harmed by gossip. But Priya, and herself. Later, after the guests had departed and Priya had been sent to bed, still glowing with the success of her birthday celebration, Rose made a difficult decision. She would speak to the Duke about the rumors and offer her resignation if necessary. Priya's future could not be tainted by scandal, however unfounded. She found him in the library, as she had expected. He stood before the fireplace, still in his evening attire, staring into the flames. "Your Grace, might I speak with you?" He turned, his expression guarded. "Miss Kincaid, Is something amiss with Priya? No, your grace, this concerns. A different matter. She took a steadying breath. I've become aware of certain rumors regarding your decision to hire me, rumors that might damage both your reputation and Priya's future prospects. His expression darkened. My aunt has been gossiping again. Not only Lady Harrington, Miss Pembroke mentioned London rumors as well. The Duke's jaw tightened. And you've come to offer your resignation, I suppose, to protect my reputation. If necessary, yes. Though it would grieve me to leave Priya. How noble. His tone was suddenly bitter. Did it not occur to you that by leaving, you would validate every malicious whisper, that people would assume there was truth to the rumors? Rose hadn't considered this perspective. I only thought that I cannot manage my own affairs, that I am unaware of drawing-room gossip. He moved toward her, his expression stormy. I have lived with rumors since my wife's death. One more makes little difference to me. But Priya will be protected by my name and fortune regardless of what society whispers. He stopped directly before her, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders, smell the faint scent of sandalwood that clung to his evening clothes. I will not dismiss a superior governess because idle tongues wag. Relief mingled with a strange disappointment in Rose's chest. He valued her as Priya's teacher, nothing more, as it should be. Then I shall remain, your grace, if you believe it best. I do. He studied her face in the firelight. The blue becomes you. The sudden shift in topic disoriented her. Thank you. My wife wore that exact shade the night I first met her. His voice had softened, his eyes distant with memory. She was beautiful, vivacious, the opposite of what had been told to expect in an arranged marriage. Rose didn't know how to respond to this unexpected confidence. I loved her, he continued, his gaze returning to the present, fixing on Rose with unsettling intensity. Despite what people whispered after her death, I loved her, and I failed her. Your Grace. She was unhappy at Thornfield, isolated. She missed London, society, excitement. His expression twisted with old pain. I was too absorbed in estate matters to see how desperately lonely she had become, the day she drowned. We had argued about returning to London. Rose's heart ached for him. It was an accident, Your Grace. You cannot blame yourself. Can't I? He turned away, his profile harsh in the firelight. Leave me, Miss Kincaid. I've said more than I intended. Rose hesitated, then curtsied and withdrew, her thoughts in turmoil. The Duke had revealed more of himself in those few minutes than in all their previous interactions combined. The glimpse of his private pain, his guilt over his wife's death, explained so much about his demeanor, his solitary nature. And yet, something about his confession left Rose unsettled. Not the fact of his wife's drowning, which was common knowledge, but the intensity with which he still grieved her. The Duke was a man haunted by his past, bound by guilt and regret. What room could such a man have in his heart for new attachments? Not that it mattered to Rose personally, she reminded herself firmly. She was the governess, nothing more. Her future lay in independence, not in foolish dreams about a man so far above her in rank and fortune that any connection between them would be deemed scandalous. Still, as she prepared for bed, she found herself remembering the feel of his hand holding hers during their dance, the unexpected gentleness in his voice when he spoke of her influence on Priya, the intensity in his eyes when he looked at her in her blue silk gown. Dangerous thoughts, leading nowhere but disappointment. Rose extinguished her candle and turned resolutely to sleep, determined to maintain the professional distance that propriety and prudence demanded. The weeks following Priya's birthday brought subtle changes to Thornfield. The Duke, instead of returning immediately to London, remained at the estate, taking a more active interest in his ward's daily activities. He joined them for afternoon rides across the moors, invited them to dine with him regularly, and often spent evenings in the library while Priya read aloud or played the pianoforte. Rose found herself increasingly aware of his presence, the way his rare smile transformed his austere features, how his voice softened when he spoke to Priya, the intensity of his gaze when it rested on Rose herself. Despite her resolve to maintain professional distance, she could not prevent the quickening of her pulse whenever he entered a room, nor the pleasure she felt when he engaged her in conversation about books, education, or current events. One warm August afternoon, while Priya was occupied with her music lesson, Rose took advantage of the fine weather to walk in the rose garden. The blooms were at their peak, filling the air with heady fragrance. She had brought a book, but found herself simply enjoying the tranquility of the moment, the sun warm on her face. "A pretty picture," the Duke's voice came from behind her. "Though I suspect Mrs. Fairley would disapprove of a governess idling away the afternoon." Rose turned, startled. The Duke stood a few paces away, dressed more casually than usual in riding clothes, his cravat loosened against the summer heat. "Your Grace, I didn't expect. That is, Priya is with the music master until 4. "I'm aware." He moved to stand beside her, surveying the garden. "These roses were my mother's pride. After she died, my father let them go to ruin. I had them restored last year." "They're beautiful," Rose said sincerely, "especially the white ones. Alba roses, my mother's favorite." He glanced at the book in her lap. "What are you reading?" Rose showed him the volume, a collection of Wordsworth's poetry. "She dwelt among the untrodden ways," he quoted softly, "a melancholy choice for such a fine day." "I find his appreciation of nature uplifting, actually," Rose replied. "The way he finds beauty in the simplest things." The Duke studied her face with an expression she couldn't interpret. "You've changed since coming to Thornfield, Miss Kincaid." "Have I?" "You're more confident, more willing to express your opinions." His mouth quirked slightly, less afraid of dukes. Rose couldn't help but smile. "Perhaps it's the country air." "Perhaps." He hesitated, then sat beside her on the stone bench. "I've been corresponding with a colleague at Oxford about educational opportunities for women. He believes the university may open limited courses to female students within the decade." "That would be remarkable progress," Rose said, genuinely interested. "Though I imagine there will be significant opposition." "Undoubtedly, but change comes eventually, even to institutions as ancient as Oxford." He turned to face her directly. "Would you have wished for such an opportunity, had it existed in your youth?" Rose considered the question seriously. "Yes, I believe I would. My father taught me Latin and Greek, mathematics and natural philosophy, subjects he would have taught a son. But formal recognition of such learning for women would be validating." "What would you have studied?" "Literature, perhaps. Or history," she smiled slightly, "though my father always said I had a talent for languages." "You speak others besides English?" "French and Italian fluently, some German. And I've been learning Hindi from Priya." The Duke looked genuinely impressed. Remarkable accomplishments for a vicar's daughter. "My father believed in education for its own sake, not merely as preparation for marriage or society." Rose's voice softened with memory. "He said knowledge was the one treasure that could never be taken from you, regardless of fortune or circumstance." "A wise man." The Duke's expression grew pensive. "I never knew my father as anything but a dissolute gambler who cared more for his pleasures than his responsibilities. By the time I was old enough to understand, he was already drinking himself to death." The personal admission startled Rose. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. His failures shaped me as surely as your father's wisdom shaped you." He rose abruptly. "I've kept you from your reading long enough. Enjoy the roses, Miss Kincaid." He strode away before she could respond, leaving Rose to wonder at the sudden shift in his mood. These glimpses into his private thoughts, his guilt over his wife, his troubled relationship with his father, revealed a man far more complex than the cold, authoritative Duke she had first encountered. That evening at dinner, the Duke announced plans for a journey. "I must visit my estate in Devon," he told Priya. "The steward reports issues with the tenants that require my personal attention." "Must you go?" Priya asked, her disappointment evident. "You've only just begun teaching me chess." "It's necessary, I'm afraid." His expression softened at the girl's crestfallen look. "Perhaps Miss Kincaid might accompany you to Devon. The sea air would be beneficial, and you could continue your studies there." Priya brightened immediately. "Oh yes, could we, Miss Kincaid?" Rose hesitated. "If your Grace thinks it appropriate." "The Devon estate has ample room for a governess and pupil," the Duke said, "and the journey would be educational for Priya. We would depart next week and stay perhaps a month." A month in closer proximity to the Duke, away from the formal structure of Thornfield. Rose knew she should find some reason to decline, to maintain the professional distance that was slipping away each time they spoke. Yet the thought of returning to the isolation of Thornfield without him held no appeal. "Then we shall be pleased to accompany you," she said, ignoring the warning voice in her mind. The Duke nodded, his expression unreadable. "Excellent, I'll make the arrangements." The journey to Devon took 3 days, with overnight stops at comfortable inns along the way. Priya, who had never travelled in England before, was fascinated by the changing landscape, the Yorkshire moors giving way to gentler hills, then the lush valleys of the south. The Duke rode alongside the carriage for part of each day, occasionally pointing out landmarks or historical sites for Priya's education. In the evenings, they dined together at the inns, the formality of Thornfield gradually giving way to a more relaxed companionship. On the third day, as they approached the Devon coast, the Duke rode up to the carriage window where Rose sat watching the scenery. "We'll reach Thornhaven by nightfall," he said. "The road ahead offers a particularly fine view of the estate. You might want to wake Priya." Rose gently roused the girl, who had dozed off during the afternoon's travel. "Look, your guardian says we're almost there." Priya pressed her face to the window eagerly. As the carriage crested a hill, a collective gasp escaped both females. Below them stretched a panoramic vista of rolling green hills sloping down to a sapphire sea. Nestled in a protected cove stood Thornhaven, smaller than Thornfield, but exquisitely proportioned, its golden stone glowing in the late afternoon sun. "It's like a fairy palace," Priya exclaimed. The Duke, riding alongside, smiled at her enthusiasm. "My mother preferred it to Thornfield. She said the sea brought colour to these stones and joy to its halls." Rose thought she understood why, as they drew closer to the house. Unlike the Gothic severity of Thornfield, Thornhaven had been built for beauty and pleasure. Large windows captured the sea views, terraced gardens descended in colourful profusion toward the water, and a sense of lightness pervaded the architecture. The household staff greeted them warmly, clearly pleased by their master's unexpected visit. Mrs. Croft, the housekeeper, showed Rose and Priya to adjoining chambers in the east wing, with balconies overlooking the sea. "His Grace instructed that you should have these rooms, miss," Mrs. Croft told Rose. "They catch the morning sun something beautiful." "They're lovely," Rose said sincerely, gazing at the elegantly appointed bedchamber with its sea-blue hangings and fresh flowers. "His Grace is most generous." "The Duke is a good man," Mrs. Croft said firmly. "No matter what some may say about him being cold or distant, those of us who have served him since he was a boy know better." "I'm beginning to understand that," Rose replied softly. The housekeeper nodded approvingly. "Dinner will be served in the small dining room at 7. His Grace thought Miss Thorne might be too tired for formal dining tonight." After Mrs. Croft departed, Rose stepped onto her balcony, breathing deeply of the salt-tinged air. Below, the gardens tumbled down toward a private beach where waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. The entire scene radiated peace and natural beauty, a stark contrast to the wild, sometimes forbidding atmosphere of Thornfield. At dinner, the Duke seemed more relaxed than Rose had ever seen him. He shed some of his usual reserve, telling Priya stories of his own childhood visits to Thornhaven, describing the tide pools teeming with marine life and the hidden caves along the shoreline. "Tomorrow, if the weather holds, we might explore the beach," he suggested. "The morning tide reveals excellent specimens for study." "Could we really?" Priya asked eagerly. "I've read about sea anemones and starfish, but I've never seen them alive." "Miss Kincaid," the Duke turned to her, "would a beach excursion suit your educational plans?" "Natural history is certainly educational," Rose agreed with a smile, "though we might need to adapt our attire for such an expedition." "Already arranged," the Duke said. "Mrs. Croft has located suitable clothing for coastal exploration." I anticipated Priya's interest. Later, after Priya had retired, exhausted from the journey, the Duke invited Rose to join him on the terrace for tea. The evening was mild, the sky a deepening blue strewn with early stars. Below them, the sea whispered against the shore in a soothing rhythm. "Thornhaven suits you," the Duke observed as Rose gazed out at the view. "You seem more at ease here than at Thornfield." "It's a beautiful place," she admitted. "There's something healing about the sea." "My thoughts exactly." He studied her profile in the fading light. "My wife felt differently. She found the isolation here even more oppressive than at Thornfield." Rose turned to face him. "May I speak frankly, Your Grace?" "When have you ever not?" A hint of amusement colored his voice. "You speak of your late wife often, always with regret. It seems the guilt you feel over her death still haunts you." His expression closed. "You presume too much, Miss Kincaid." "Perhaps. But I've observed that you punish yourself for her unhappiness, her death. You've built a life around that guilt. And you think you understand what happened." His voice had grown dangerously quiet. "You think you know what I did, or failed to do." "I know only what you've told me," Rose said gently. "That she was unhappy, isolated, that you argued before her death. But accidents happen, Your Grace, even to those we love most. Carrying such guilt serves no one, least of all yourself." He stood abruptly, his face harsh in the twilight. "You know nothing about it, nothing." He strode to the balustrade, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "My wife's death was no accident." The words hung in the night air between them. Rose felt her heart stutter. "What do you mean?" For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly she had to strain to hear, he said, "Lucinda took her own life. She left a letter blaming me for her unhappiness, her isolation, for failing to love her as she deserved." Rose couldn't suppress a small gasp of shock. "Your Grace, Now you understand." He turned back to her, his expression bleak. "The great Duke, so cold and proper, drove his beautiful young wife to suicide. That's the truth that society whispers behind gloved hands. But surely no one believes." "What they believe doesn't matter. I know the truth." His voice roughened with emotion. "I married Lucinda because our families arranged it, because her fortune helped save Thornfield after my father's excesses. I respected her, admired her beauty and wit. But I never loved her as she needed to be loved." Rose felt tears pricking behind her eyes. "You cannot blame yourself for not feeling what you did not feel." "Can't I? I made vows to cherish her. Instead, I buried myself in estate business, in London politics, leaving her alone with her disappointments." His laugh was bitter. "She sought attention elsewhere eventually. I discovered her affair, confronted her. The night before she drowned, I told her I would never grant her the divorce she wanted." "You were within your rights," Rose said softly. "Any husband would have done the same." "Perhaps. But a better man might have found a way to make her happy before it came to that." He passed a hand over his face. "I don't know why I'm telling you this. No one outside the family knows the full truth." Sometimes it helps to speak of burdens we carry alone. Rose hesitated, then added, "Thank you for trusting me." He studied her face in the gathering darkness. "You're a surprising woman, Miss Kincaid. Most would be horrified by such a confidence." "I'm not horrified. Saddened, yes, for both of you, but we all carry regrets." "Even you." "What could someone so young possibly regret?" Rose smiled faintly. "I regret not appreciating my parents more while they lived. I regret sometimes choosing duty over joy. Small things, perhaps, compared to yours, but regrets nonetheless." The Duke was silent for a long moment. "Tomorrow," he said finally, "we will take Priya to the tide pools, and for a few hours we will set aside the past and simply enjoy the present." "Can you do that, Miss Kincaid?" "I believe I can, Your Grace." "Good." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Rose, thank you for listening." It was the first time he had used her given name. The intimacy of it, combined with the raw honesty of their conversation, left Rose breathless long after he had gone. The Duke had revealed his deepest shame to her, a secret that could destroy his reputation if widely known. Such trust was both a gift and a burden, and something else had changed as well. In speaking of his wife, in acknowledging his failure to love her, the Duke had revealed a capacity for honesty about his own heart that Rose found unexpectedly moving. He was not the cold, unfeeling man society painted him to be, but rather one who felt his responsibilities so deeply that he could not forgive himself for his perceived failures. As she finally prepared for bed, Rose realized with a sense of inevitability that she was in grave danger of falling in love with the Duke of Thornfield. Not the wealthy, powerful nobleman, but the man beneath the title, flawed, honorable, haunted by guilt, yet capable of tenderness toward an orphaned ward and unexpected confidences with a governess. Such feelings could lead nowhere but heartbreak. The gulf between them remained as vast as ever. Yet knowing this did nothing to slow the quickening of her pulse when she thought of their conversation or the way he had said her name, Rose, as though tasting it for the first time. "Foolishness," she whispered to herself as she extinguished her candle. "Remember who you are and who he is." But as she drifted towards sleep, lulled by the distant sound of waves, Rose wondered if she had already crossed a boundary from which there could be no return. The days at Thornhaven fell into a pleasant pattern. Mornings were devoted to exploring the shoreline with Priya, collecting specimens for study, or sketching the dramatic coastal scenery. Afternoons included more traditional lessons, though conducted on the terrace when weather permitted. Evenings brought dinner with the Duke, followed by music, reading aloud, or chess lessons for Priya. Throughout it all, Rose was acutely aware of the Duke's presence, his rare smiles when Priya made a clever move in chess, his thoughtful questions about their studies, the intensity of his gaze when it rested on Rose herself. He never referred to their twilight conversation about his wife, yet something had shifted between them. A wall had fallen, revealing glimpses of the man behind the ducal facade. A fortnight into their stay, the Duke's business with his tenants concluded successfully. Rather than return immediately to Thornfield or London, however, he proposed extending their sojourn. "The sea air agrees with Priya," he observed over breakfast, "and I find myself reluctant to return to city matters just yet." "Could we stay until September?" Priya asked eagerly. "Mrs. Croft says there will be a village harvest festival with dancing and music." The Duke glanced at Rose. "Would a longer stay disrupt your educational plans?" "Not at all," she assured him. "Priya can continue her studies here as easily as at Thornfield." In truth, Rose was as reluctant as Priya to leave Thornhaven, with its peaceful beauty and the curious sense of freedom it seemed to inspire in all of them. "Then it's settled," the Duke declared. "We shall remain until the harvest festival at least." That afternoon, while Priya took her music lesson with the village organist, Rose seized the opportunity for a solitary walk along the beach. The tide was out, revealing a wide expanse of sand dotted with tidal pools. The August sun was warm but not oppressive, the sea breeze refreshing against her skin. She had removed her shoes to wade in the shallows, holding her skirts above her ankles in a most unladylike fashion, when she spotted a familiar figure on the cliffs above, the Duke, watching her from horseback. Embarrassed at being caught in such an undignified position, Rose quickly stepped back onto dry sand and reached for her discarded shoes. The Duke dismounted and made his way down the coastal path toward her. By the time he reached the beach, Rose had restored her footwear and attempted to tidy wind-tousled hair. "Your Grace," she greeted him, feeling oddly self-conscious. "I was taking advantage of Priya's music lesson for some fresh air." "No need to explain," he gestured toward the sea. "Thornhaven tends to inspire such moments of freedom. My mother used to walk barefoot along this very stretch of beach, scandalizing my father." "I can see why she loved it here," Rose said, gazing out at the sparkling water. "There's something about the endless horizon that makes one's problems seem smaller." "Indeed," he studied her face, his expression softening. "You look happy, Rose." Again, her given name, the intimacy of it still startled her. "I am happy, I think. Thornhaven has been good for all of us." "Yes," he turned to look out at the sea. "I had forgotten what it was like to simply live, without the weight of London society and politics pressing down. Will you return there after the harvest festival?" A shadow crossed his face. "Eventually, there are responsibilities I cannot ignore indefinitely." "Of course." Rose felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of their idyll ending. "Priya will miss you when you go." "Only Priya?" The question was soft, almost hesitant. Rose's heart quickened. That is, we have all grown accustomed to your company." He turned to face her fully, his expression suddenly intent. "I have a confession to make, Rose. I had business in Devon, yes, but I could have sent my steward to handle it. I wanted to bring you and Priya to Thornhaven." "Why?" the word escaped, before she could consider its impropriety. "Because I wanted to know if what I was beginning to feel at Thornfield would follow me here, if it was merely proximity, routine, or," he trailed off, his gaze never leaving her face. "Or," Rose prompted, scarcely breathing. "Or something more enduring." He stepped closer. "I think you know what I'm trying to say, though I'm making a poor job of it." "Your Grace." "Ravenel," he corrected gently. "After everything, I think you might use my name, at least when we're alone." Ravenel. The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her pulse race. "What you're suggesting." "It's impossible." "Is it?" He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a strand of hair the wind had loosened from her chignon. "Society would certainly think so, a duke and a governess, yet here we are." Rose stepped back, her thoughts in turmoil. "You can't mean that is your position, your responsibilities." "Priya's future. I know the obstacles as well as you." His expression grew serious. "I have no right to speak of this, to burden you with feelings that can lead nowhere under current circumstances. Yet I find I cannot maintain the pretense of mere employer and employee any longer." "What are you saying?" Rose whispered, though she feared she already knew. "That I care for you, Rose Kincaid. More deeply than I believed possible after Lucinda's death. That these weeks at Thornhaven have shown me a possibility of happiness I had resigned myself to never experiencing." His voice roughened. "And that I have no idea what to do about it, given the realities of our situations." Rose felt tears pricking behind her eyes. "Neither do I." He reached for her hand, holding it gently between both of his. "Then perhaps, for now, we simply acknowledge the truth between us. No decisions, no declarations, just honesty." "Honesty," Rose repeated, her voice unsteady. "Very well, I care for you too, Ravenel. Against all reason and propriety." His fingers tightened around hers. For a moment, she thought he might pull her closer, perhaps even kiss her. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles that was somehow more intimate than any embrace could have been. "Thank you," he said softly. For your courage. Few would dare to speak such truth to a duke. I've never been particularly good at hiding my thoughts from you, she admitted with a small smile. For which I am profoundly grateful. He released her hand reluctantly. I should return to the house. Priya will be finishing her lessons soon. Yes, of course. Rose smoothed her skirts, trying to regain her composure. I'll follow shortly. He hesitated, then turned and walked back up the coastal path to where his horse waited. Rose remained on the beach, her emotions in turmoil. The Duke, Ravenel, cared for her, had admitted it openly. And she, heaven help her, had confessed the same. What madness was this? Nothing could come of such feelings. He was one of the wealthiest, most powerful men in England. She was a penniless governess. Even if he were free to marry where he chose, which, as a duke, he decidedly was not, society would never accept such a match. Lady Harrington's horror at the mere suspicion of his interest in Rose was evidence enough of that. And yet, he had spoken of happiness, of possibilities, as though he were considering options beyond the conventional path expected of him. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Be sensible, Rose murmured to herself as she finally turned toward the house. Nothing has changed, nothing can change. But in her heart, she knew everything had changed the moment he spoke her name. The following days at Thornhaven were charged with an unspoken tension. Outwardly, little changed. They continued their routines of lessons, explorations, meals together. Yet Rose was acutely aware of every glance, every accidental touch, every moment alone with the Duke. He maintained impeccable propriety when Priya or the servants were present, addressing her formally as Miss Kincaid and keeping a proper distance. But occasionally, when circumstances allowed them a private moment, passing in a corridor, lingering in the library after Priya had gone to bed, he would speak her given name softly, or his hand would briefly touch hers, sending warmth coursing through her veins. They did not speak again of the feelings they had confessed on the beach. It hung between them, acknowledged yet unaddressed, like a promise neither could fulfill nor forget. A week after their beach conversation, the household received an unexpected visitor. Lord Carlisle, a friend of the Duke's from London, arrived unannounced on his way to his own coastal property. Thornfield. The gentleman greeted the Duke with genuine warmth. When I heard you were in residence at Thornhaven, I couldn't pass by without paying my respects. Carlisle, you're looking well. The Duke introduced him to Priya, then to Rose, who curtsied formally. Lord Carlisle's eyebrows rose slightly at the presence of a governess at the dinner table, but he made no comment. Throughout the meal, he regaled them with London gossip, parliamentary news, and humorous anecdotes about mutual acquaintances. Lady Harrington sends her regards, he mentioned casually over dessert. She was most disappointed to miss you in town last month. The Duke's expression cooled. My aunt and I rarely see eye to eye these days. So I gathered. Lord Carlisle glanced briefly at Rose. She had much to say about your household arrangements at Thornfield. No doubt, the Duke's tone discouraged further discussion on the topic. Priya, perhaps you would play for us after dinner. Lord Carlisle is a great appreciator of music. Later, after Priya had been sent to bed, the gentleman invited Rose to join them for tea in the drawing room. She accepted reluctantly, aware of Lord Carlisle's speculative gaze. Miss Kincaid, he said as she took her seat, the Duke tells me you're responsible for his ward's education. You must be quite exceptional. He's not easily impressed. Miss Thorne is an exceptional student, Rose replied diplomatically. Any success is due to her natural intelligence and curiosity. Too modest by half, Lord Carlisle turned to the Duke. You've found a rare gem, Thornfield. Most governesses I've encountered were either tyrannical dragons or simpering incompetents. Miss Kincaid is neither, the Duke said dryly. Fortunately for Priya. The conversation drifted to politics, with Lord Carlisle updating the Duke on recent parliamentary manoeuvres. Rose listened with interest, occasionally asking questions that seemed to surprise and impress their visitor. "You're remarkably well informed for a—" Lord Carlisle caught himself. "That is, your understanding of political matters is impressive, Miss Kincaid. My father believed women should comprehend the forces that shape our nation, even if we cannot vote," Rose explained. "And His Grace has been kind enough to provide newspapers and journals here at Thornhaven." "Indeed," Lord Carlisle shot his friend a curious glance. "How progressive of you, Thornfield." The Duke merely raised an eyebrow. "It's late, and Miss Kincaid rises early to begin Priya's lessons. We should not keep her." Taking the hint, Rose bid the gentleman good night and retired to her chambers. Through her open balcony doors, she could hear their voices continuing on the terrace below, not their words, but the rise and fall of their conversation, occasionally punctuated by Lord Carlisle's laugh. The following morning, Lord Carlisle departed after breakfast, but not before seeking a private word with Rose in the library. "Miss Kincaid," he began, his expression unusually serious, "I hope you'll forgive my frankness, but I've known Thornfield since our Oxford days." Rose tensed. "What of it, my lord?" "He's a good man, the best I know, in fact, but he carries burdens few understand." Lord Carlisle hesitated. "His first marriage, it ended tragically." "I'm aware of the circumstances," Rose said carefully. "Are you, all of them?" Lord Carlisle studied her face. "The Duchess's death nearly destroyed him, not just grief but guilt. He believed he failed her." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see how he looks at you." Lord Carlisle's voice softened. "And how you look at him. And while I wish only happiness for my friend, I fear complications." Rose felt her face warm. "You misunderstand, my lord. I am merely His Grace's employee." "If that were true, Miss Kincaid, I wouldn't be having this conversation." He smiled sadly. "Be careful with his heart. It's more fragile than he lets anyone see." Before Rose could formulate a response, the gentleman bowed and left her standing speechless in the library. Lord Carlisle's visit, brief as it was, shattered the peaceful isolation they had enjoyed at Thornhaven. It was a reminder of the world beyond their seaside retreat, a world where dukes did not fall in love with governesses, where society's rules could not be defied without consequences. That evening, the Duke sought Rose out on the terrace after Priya had retired. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky, the air scented with salt and roses. "Carlisle spoke to you," he said without preamble. "Before he left." "Yes." Rose kept her gaze on the distant horizon. "He was concerned for you." "He overstepped." The Duke moved to stand beside her at the balustrade. "What did he say?" "That I should be careful with your heart. That your wife's death affected you more deeply than most realize." "He means well," the Duke sighed, "but he sees complications where there need be none." Rose turned to face him. "Don't there, you're a duke, I'm a governess. Society would never accept." "Damn society," he interrupted, with unexpected vehemence. "I've spent my entire life conforming to its expectations, marrying the appropriate bride, managing the family estates, upholding the Thornfield name and honor. And where did it lead? To a wife who took her own life rather than remain bound to me." "Ravenel." "No, let me finish." He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation from a man usually so controlled. "These weeks at Thornhaven have shown me a different possibility, not just with you, though that's everything, but seeing Priya flourish without the constraints of London society. Rediscovering pleasures I'd forgotten, conversation, laughter, simple human connection." Rose felt tears threatening. "It can't last, you know that." "Why not?" He took her hands in his gaze intense. "Why must we accept that happiness is impossible, simply because convention dictates it?" "Because you have responsibilities," Rose said gently. "To your title, your estates, your ward's future, you cannot simply opt out of them because of feelings for a governess." "No, He released her hands, his expression hardening. But I can choose how I fulfill those responsibilities, whether I let society dictate my personal happiness as it dictates my public duties. What are you saying? He was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkness. I don't know yet, he admitted finally. Only that I cannot bear the thought of returning to my former existence, of watching you and Priya from a distance, bound by the rigid proprieties of employer and employee. And I cannot bear the thought of bringing scandal to your name or Priya's future, Rose whispered. If society believed you had developed feelings for your ward's governess. Society already whispers about us if Carlyle's hints are any indication. My aunt has seen to that. All the more reason for discretion. Rose stepped back, creating distance between them. We must be sensible, Ravenel. Whatever we feel, we cannot act upon it. His expression grew bleak. So you would have us deny our hearts for propriety's sake? I would have us remember our responsibilities, she said, though each word cost her. To Priya, to your position, to the future we both knew awaited us long before we met. For a moment she thought he might argue further. Instead, he bowed stiffly. As you wish, Miss Kincaid. I bid you good night. He left her standing alone on the terrace, the stars cold and distant above her. Rose wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the urge to call him back, to tell him she hadn't meant it, that she wanted nothing more than to explore the possibilities he had spoken of. But she had meant it. Painful as it was to acknowledge, their brief idyll at Thornhaven could not change the realities that awaited them. The Duke had duties that extended far beyond his own happiness, or hers. And Rose had her own dreams of independence to consider, dreams that had sustained her through years of service to others. Loving him would mean giving up those dreams, and while her heart might be willing to make that sacrifice, could she ask him to give up the duties and responsibilities that defined him? To risk scandal that would taint not only his name, but Priya's future as well? No, better to end things now, before they had properly begun, before either of them became more deeply entangled in feelings that could lead nowhere but heartbreak. With this resolution firmly in mind, Rose returned to her chambers, determined to maintain proper distance between herself and the Duke for the remainder of their stay at Thornhaven, no matter how much it hurt them both. The final weeks of their stay at Thornhaven passed with painful formality. The Duke addressed Rose as Miss Kincaid exclusively, limited their interactions to matters concerning Priya's education, and often absented himself on estate business. The easy companionship they had enjoyed evaporated, replaced by a stilted courtesy that fooled no one, least of all Priya. Have you and Cousin Ravenel quarrelled? The girl asked one morning during their botany lesson. You barely speak to each other anymore. Of course not, Rose replied, keeping her tone light. His Grace is simply busy with estate matters before our return to Thornfield. Priya's expression remained skeptical. He watches you when you're not looking, and you watch him. It's very odd. That's enough, Priya. Please continue with your specimen classification. The harvest festival approached, their last engagement before returning to Yorkshire. Rose dreaded it, knowing the celebration would require her to spend hours in the Duke's company, maintaining the pretense that nothing had changed between them. The evening of the festival arrived, mild and clear, with a full moon rising over the sea. The entire household travelled to the village green, where coloured lanterns hung from trees, musicians played lively country tunes, and tables groaned under the weight of harvest bounty. The villagers greeted their Duke with genuine warmth and respect. Unlike at Thornfield, where his visits were rare, the people of Thornhaven knew him well. He had spent summers here as a boy, Rose learned from Mrs. Croft, and had always treated the tenants fairly. The old Duke neglected this place shamefully, the housekeeper confided, as they watched the Duke speaking with a group of tenant farmers. But his Grace restored the cottages, rebuilt the quay, even established a school for the children. They adore him here. Priya was soon swept into a circle of village children playing games, leaving Rose momentarily alone. She stood at the edge of the celebration, watching the dancers, when Lord Pemberton, a neighbouring gentleman, approached. "Miss Kincaid, isn't it? We met at young Miss Thorne's birthday." Rose curtsied. "Indeed, my lord. How kind of you to remember. Hard to forget such a charming addition to our local society." He gestured toward the dancers. "Might I claim this set? Country dances require little skill, I assure you." Reluctant to refuse and draw attention to herself, Rose accepted. The dance was simple enough, bringing partners together and apart in a pattern that required minimal conversation. As they circled, she caught sight of the Duke watching from the edge of the green, his expression unreadable. When the dance ended, Lord Pemberton escorted her back to the edge of the dancing area, chatting pleasantly about the festival traditions. They were joined by several other local gentry, curious about the Duke's ward and her unusual education. Rose answered their questions politely but carefully, aware of her delicate position as neither family nor mere servant. "His Grace has progressive views on female education," she explained when Lady Morton expressed surprise at Priya's study of mathematics. "He believes intelligence should be cultivated regardless of gender." "How very unlike his father," an elderly gentleman remarked. "The old Duke believed women were ornaments, nothing more. Treated his Duchess abominably, as I recall." "Mr. Thornfield is nothing like his father," Lord Pemberton said firmly. "He's restored the family's honour and fortune through sheer determination and principle." "Indeed," Lady Morton agreed. "Which makes his prolonged bachelorhood all the more perplexing. The Thornfield line needs an heir, and the Duke is not getting any younger." Rose felt herself tensing at the turn in conversation. "I hear Lady Elizabeth Standish has set her cap for him," another lady contributed eagerly. "Her father is most encouraging of the match." "The Earl of Westfield's daughter, a suitable choice," Lady Morton nodded approvingly. "Beauty, breeding, and a substantial dowry, just what the Thornfield estates require." "I believe they were seen together at Almack's just before the Duke left London," Lord Pemberton added. "Lady Harrington was positively crowing about the potential match, according to my sister." Rose felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her feet. The Duke considering marriage to Lady Elizabeth, while at the same time speaking to Rose of feelings, of possibilities. No, she was being unfair. They had no understanding, no promises between them. She herself had insisted they could not act on their feelings. He was free to court suitable ladies of his own rank. It was what society expected of him, what his position demanded. "Miss Kincaid, are you unwell?" Lady Morton was peering at her with concern. "You've gone quite pale." "I'm fine," Rose managed. "Just a little warm from dancing. If you'll excuse me, I should check on Miss Thorne." She moved away quickly, seeking the cool darkness beyond the lantern-lit green. Finding a quiet spot beneath an oak tree, she pressed her hand against her racing heart, drawing deep breaths to calm herself. "Rose." She startled at the Duke's voice behind her. "Your Grace." "I didn't hear you approach." "No, Ravenel, now. Have we returned to formality so completely?" Rose turned to face him. "It seems appropriate, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" His tone sharpened. "Has someone said something to upset you?" "Not intentionally." She lifted her chin. "I merely learned that congratulations might soon be in order. Lady Elizabeth Standish is apparently a most suitable match for a duke in need of an heir." His expression darkened. "Gossip, nothing more." "Is it? Lady Harrington seems to think otherwise." "My aunt has been attempting to arrange my marriage since Lucinda died. Her opinion counts for nothing." "But society's does," Rose countered. "And society expects you to marry appropriately, to secure your line, to fulfill your duty to your title and estates." "And what of my duty to myself, to my own happiness?" He moved closer, his voice low and intense. Do you think I could find happiness with a woman chosen for her dowry and bloodline after knowing you? The words stole her breath. Ravenel. No, listen to me. These past weeks have shown me what's possible between two people who understand each other, who share ideas and values beyond the superficial connections of rank and fortune. His hands came up to frame her face. I cannot go back to the emptiness of my former existence. I won't. What choice do we have? Rose whispered, her resolve weakening at his touch. We could marry. The words hung between them, shocking in their simplicity, their audacity. That's impossible, she managed finally. You know it is. Why? Because you're not of noble birth, because society would disapprove. His thumbs stroked her cheeks gently. I am a duke. I answer to no one but the crown and my own conscience. And your conscience would allow you to subject Priya to the scandal such a match would create. To risk her future prospects because of feelings for her governess. His hands fell away. Is that what you believe would happen? I believe society is cruel to those who defy its rules, especially women. Especially those it deems presumptuous. Rose fought to keep her voice steady. Priya would bear the brunt of that cruelty, as would any children we might have. And if I told you, I don't care. That I would protect you all, stand against society itself if necessary. I would say you speak from the privilege of your position. You have never known what it means to be vulnerable, to depend on the goodwill of others for your very survival. Rose stepped back, creating distance between them. I have, and I could not bear to bring such vulnerability to those I love. Those you love, he repeated softly. Do you love me, Rose? The direct question caught her off guard. That is. The truth, please. After everything, we owe each other that much. Rose closed her eyes briefly. Yes, God help me, I love you, but love isn't always enough. It could be if we were brave enough. He reached for her hand. Come away with me. Now, tonight, we'll take Priya and go to Scotland. We can be married there without bans or licenses. Elopement, Rose gasped. That would only make the scandal worse. Then we'll do it properly. I'll return to London, announce our engagement, weather whatever storm comes. His grip tightened. But I will not lose you, Rose. Not to society's expectations, not to your fears for the future. A shout from the village green interrupted them, Priya's voice, calling Rose's name. I must go, Rose said, pulling her hand free. She's looking for me. This conversation isn't finished, the Duke warned. Meet me tonight after Priya is asleep on the terrace. Rose hesitated, then nodded once before hurrying back toward the festivities. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur. Rose went through the motions of enjoyment, watching Priya dance with village children, accepting another dance with Lord Pemberton, smiling at the right moments during conversations she scarcely heard. Her thoughts remained fixed on the Duke's words, his proposal, the impossible choice before her. Marriage, to a duke. The very idea was absurd, yet he had spoken it aloud, had offered to defy society for her sake. The part of her heart that loved him wanted to accept, to seize this chance at happiness, regardless of consequences. But the practical part of her mind, the part that had kept her safe and independent through years of vulnerability, recoiled from the risks such a choice would bring. Later, after they had returned to Thornhaven and Priya had been settled for the night, Rose stood in her chamber, debating whether to meet the Duke as promised. To go would be to continue a conversation that could only end in pain for one or both of them. To stay would be cowardice. In the end, duty decided her. Whatever his feelings, whatever her own, they deserved a proper resolution. She owed him the courtesy of facing him directly. The night was cooler than usual, a hint of autumn in the air as Rose stepped onto the terrace. The Duke stood at the balustrade, looking out toward the sea, his posture rigid with tension. You came, he said without turning. I wasn't certain you would. I said I would. Rose remained near the doors, keeping distance between them. though I'm not sure what remains to be said. Everything. Nothing, he turned to face her at last. I've been standing here trying to formulate arguments to convince you that love is worth any sacrifice, any risk, that together we could face whatever society might throw at us. And did you succeed? No, his laugh was hollow. Because everything you said earlier was true, society would be cruel. Priya would suffer for our choice. Our children would bear the whispers, the subtle cruelties of the tongue. I cannot promise you otherwise. Rose felt tears threatening. Then we are at an impasse. Perhaps, he moved toward her slowly, as if afraid she might flee. Or perhaps there is a third path, one neither of us has considered. What path? Patience. He stopped before her, close enough to touch, but maintaining the small space between them. I return to London tomorrow. There are matters I must attend to, estate business, parliamentary duties, matters I have neglected these past weeks. I understand, Rose said, though her heart ached at the thought of his departure. Let me finish, his voice gentled. I must return to London, yes, but I need not take up my former life as if nothing has changed. I am still a duke, still bound by duties to my name and position. But how I fulfill those duties, that remains my choice. What are you suggesting? Time, space to consider our situation from all angles, to seek a solution that might allow us happiness without sacrificing Priya's welfare or my responsibilities. He reached for her hand, holding it lightly. I ask only that you don't close your heart to the possibility that we might find a way forward together. Rose hesitated, and if no solution presents itself, if duty and heart remain in conflict, then we will face that reality when we must. His fingers tightened around hers, but I refuse to surrender to despair without first exhausting every alternative. The sincerity in his voice, the determination in his eyes, weakened Rose's resolve. Very well, she agreed softly. Time and distance, then, to think, to consider. Thank you. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss against her palm that made her breath catch. And when we return to Thornfield next month, we will speak again, with clearer minds, perhaps. Yes, Rose withdrew her hand reluctantly. Good night, Ravenel. Safe journey tomorrow. Good night, my Rose. He stepped back, allowing her to pass. Dream of possibilities, not obstacles. Rose returned to her chamber, her emotions in turmoil. The Duke, Ravenel, had not pressed his suit, had not attempted to override her concerns with passionate declarations. Instead, he had acknowledged the realities they faced while refusing to accept them as insurmountable. It was this quality, his blend of practicality and determination, his respect for her concerns even as he challenged her fears, that had captured her heart so completely. He did not dismiss the obstacles before them, yet neither did he surrender to them. As she prepared for bed, Rose allowed herself, for the first time, to truly contemplate the possibility of becoming a duchess. Not the trappings of the role, the wealth, the status, the privileges, but the responsibilities it would entail, the scrutiny she would face, the standards to which she would be held, the judgment she would endure. Could she bear it for love of him? Could she transform herself from governess to duchess, facing down society's disapproval with the same courage she had shown in building her independent life after her parents' death? She didn't know. But she had promised to consider, to keep her heart open to possibilities, and that, at least, she could do. The Duke departed for London the following morning, leaving Priya in Rose's care at Thornhaven for another week before they too would return to Thornfield. His farewell was formal, proper, a polite bow to Rose, a gentle word for Priya, but his eyes conveyed everything his manner could not. Take care of each other, he said as he entered his waiting carriage. I shall see you both at Thornfield. The next 7 days passed pleasantly enough. Rose and Priya continued their explorations of the coastline, completed their studies in the morning sunshine, and enjoyed the last of the summer weather before their journey north. If Rose sometimes found herself gazing out to sea, lost in thoughts of grey eyes and impossible choices, Priya was tactful enough not to mention it. They returned to Thornfield in early September, the moors ablaze with late summer heather. The ancient house seemed somehow darker, more forbidding after the light-filled rooms of Thornhaven, but it was home now in a way it hadn't been before. Mrs. Fletcher greeted them warmly. "Welcome back, Miss Kincaid, Miss Thorne. The house has been too quiet without you." "Has His Grace sent word of when he might return?" Rose asked, trying to sound merely polite rather than eager. "Indeed he has. A letter arrived just yesterday saying he expects to reach Thornfield by month's end." The housekeeper hesitated. "There was also a letter for you, Miss Kincaid. I placed it in your sitting room." Rose waited until Priya had been settled in her own chambers before seeking out the letter. It lay on her writing desk, the Duke's bold handwriting instantly recognizable on the envelope. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal. "My dear Rose," it began, the informality of the address sending warmth through her chest. "I write to you from London, where the season is concluding and society prepares for its retreat to country estates, for autumn shooting parties and harvest celebrations. The contrast between this world and the peace we knew at Thornhaven could not be more stark. I have spent these days since our parting considering our situation from every angle. My duties as Duke, Priya's welfare, society's expectations, and most importantly, our feelings for each other. I believe I begin to see a path forward, though it will require courage and patience from us both. I cannot share my thoughts fully in a letter. Some matters must be discussed face to face. But know this, my feelings remain unchanged. Distance has only confirmed what I knew at Thornhaven, that in you I have found something rare and precious, something worth fighting for, whatever the cost. I will return to Thornfield by September's end. Until then, take care of yourself and our ward. Yours, Ravenel." Rose read the letter twice more, her heart beating rapidly. He had found a path forward. What could he mean? And he had called Priya our ward. A small thing, perhaps, but significant in its implication of shared responsibility, shared future. The weeks until his return stretched endlessly before her. Rose threw herself into Priya's education with renewed vigor, determined to keep her mind occupied with duties rather than speculation. They resumed their routines, morning lessons in the schoolroom, afternoon walks on the moors when weather permitted, evenings reading in the library or practicing music in the drawing room. September drew to a close with no sign of the Duke. Rose tried not to show her disappointment, reminding herself that London business was unpredictable, that travel plans often changed, that he would come when he could. On the last day of the month, as Rose and Priya walked in the rose garden, enjoying the late blooms that defied the cooling weather, Grave appeared with an unexpected announcement. "Miss Kincaid, Miss Thorne. His Grace's carriage has been sighted on the North Road. He should arrive within the hour." Priya clapped her hands in delight. "Cousin Ravenel is coming. May we go to meet him, Miss Kincaid?" "I think we should prepare to receive him properly," Rose suggested, her own heart leaping at the news. "Let's change into fresh gowns and be ready in the entrance hall to welcome him home." They hurried inside, Priya chattering excitedly about all she wished to tell her guardian. Rose moved more sedately, though her pulse raced with anticipation. After nearly a month apart, after his letter with its tantalizing hint of a solution, she would finally see him again. She chose her garments with unusual care. A deep green day dress that the dressmaker had assured her brought out the violet undertones in her eyes, her hair arranged simply but elegantly. Not vanity, she told herself, but appropriate respect for the master of Thornfield returning home. The Duke's arrival was announced by the sound of carriage wheels on gravel, the opening of the great doors, voices in the entrance hall. Rose descended the stairs with Priya, maintaining a dignified pace despite her eagerness. The Duke stood in the hall, still in his travelling clothes, looking somewhat weary but brightening visibly at the sight of Priya hurrying toward him. Cousin Revenel, you're finally home. The girl threw propriety to the winds, embracing him without hesitation. So I am, he agreed, returning her embrace before setting her gently away. And you've grown at least an inch since Devon, I swear it. His gaze lifted to Rose, who had reached the bottom of the stairs and curtsied formally. Miss Kincaid, I trust your journey back to Thornfield was comfortable. Very much so, Your Grace. She maintained the formality, aware of the servants hovering nearby. Priya has continued her studies diligently in your absence. Excellent, he turned to Grave. Has my guest arrived yet? Not yet, Your Grace, but we expect the carriage within the hour based on your instructions. Guest, Priya asked curiously. Who's coming to Thornfield? A surprise, the Duke said, smiling slightly. For both of you. Now I must change after my journey. We'll speak at dinner. He strode up the stairs, leaving Rose and Priya to exchange puzzled glances. A surprise guest. Priya whispered as they returned to the schoolroom. Who do you think it might be? I have no idea, Rose replied honestly, though a knot of apprehension formed in her stomach. The Duke's letter had mentioned a path forward. Could this guest be part of his solution? And if so, what did that mean for her? An hour later, as Rose was helping Priya review her French vocabulary, another carriage was heard approaching Thornfield. Curiosity overwhelming them both, they moved to the schoolroom window that overlooked the drive. A fashionable travelling coach had pulled up before the house. From it emerged a slender woman in an elegant travelling ensemble, her face obscured by a stylish bonnet. She turned, offering her hand to a second passenger, a distinguished-looking gentleman of perhaps 60, whose bearing suggested military service. Who are they? Priya wondered aloud. Do you recognize them, Miss Kincaid? No, Rose admitted, a strange foreboding gripping her heart. I've never seen them before. They were expected at dinner, Grave informed them later. The Duke requested their presence in the drawing-room beforehand to meet the guests. Rose dressed with particular care, the apprehension in her chest growing. Something about the woman's elegant figure, the way the Duke had referred to her arrival as a surprise. It filled Rose with dread she could not quite articulate. Could this be Lady Elizabeth Standish? Had the Duke, despite his protestations at Thornhaven, decided to pursue a suitable match after all? Was Rose about to be introduced to his future Duchess? The thought made her physically ill. Yet she forced herself to complete her toilette, to escort Priya downstairs, to prepare herself for whatever revelation awaited in the drawing-room. The Duke stood by the fireplace, changed from his travelling clothes into evening attire. Beside him were the visitors, the gentleman, indeed military in bearing with silver-streaked hair and a neatly trimmed moustache, and the woman, now revealed to be perhaps 35, strikingly beautiful with golden hair and elegant features. Ah, Miss Kincaid, Priya, allow me to introduce our guests. The Duke gestured to the pair, General Sir William Kincaid and his daughter, Lady Diana Kincaid Thornton. Rose froze, the name striking her like physical blows. Kincaid, how could that be? Sir William is your father's cousin, Rose, the Duke continued, using her given name openly for the first time before others. I've spent these weeks in London locating your remaining family. My family? Rose stared at the gentleman, who was regarding her with evident emotion. But I was told there were none, that my father was estranged from his family when he chose to enter the church. He was, Sir William acknowledged, stepping forward. Estranged from his father, my uncle, who refused to accept his choice of vocation, but never from me. We corresponded in secret for years, though circumstances kept us from meeting in person. I don't understand, Rose whispered. If you knew of me, why did you never come forward after my parents died, when I was left alone? Because I was in India with my regiment when the tragedy occurred, Sir William said gently. By the time news reached me and I returned to England, you had already secured a position as a governess. My inquiries led to a school in Bath, but you had already left for another post. The trail went cold. Until the Duke found you, Lady Diana added, her voice warm with genuine feeling. He appeared at our home in London 3 weeks ago, asking about William Kincaid, the Vicar of Thornley. When Father confirmed the connection, His Grace revealed he had employed the vicar's daughter as his ward's governess. Rose looked at the Duke, confusion warring with a growing understanding. You've been searching for my family all this time in London. Among other matters, he acknowledged, it seemed a necessary first step. First step toward what? Rose asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. The Duke's expression softened. Toward removing one of the obstacles between us. You feared society's reaction to a duke marrying a governess of no family or connections. But you are not without family, Rose. You are the niece of General Sir William Kincaid, a decorated hero of the Crimean War and cousin to the Earl of Westmoreland. Priya, who had been listening with wide-eyed amazement, suddenly clapped her hands. Does this mean you're going to marry Miss Kincaid, Cousin Ravenel? Is that the surprise? A shocked silence fell over the room. Sir William's eyebrows rose, Lady Diana pressed a hand to her lips to hide a smile, and the Duke himself appeared momentarily disconcerted by the child's directness. That, he said finally, recovering his composure, would depend entirely on Miss Kincaid's wishes. I have merely endeavoured to provide her with information that might inform her decision. Rose felt lightheaded, overwhelmed by revelations coming too quickly to process. Family she had never known existed, connections to nobility she had never suspected, the Duke's extraordinary efforts to address her concerns about their potential match. I think, Lady Diana said tactfully, that Miss Kincaid might appreciate some time to absorb these revelations before dinner. Perhaps she would like to speak privately with Father for a few moments. Of course, the Duke nodded. Priya, why don't you show Lady Diana the library? I believe you'll find you share an interest in botanical illustrations. As Priya led the lady from the room, chattering excitedly, the Duke turned to Rose. I'll leave you with Sir William. I believe you have much to discuss. He departed, closing the door behind him, leaving Rose alone with the man who claimed to be her father's cousin, her uncle. You look so like him, Sir William said softly. William had those same eyes, unusual, almost violet in certain lights, and that determined set to the chin. Stubborn, my cousin was, principled. You truly knew him? Rose asked, her voice unsteady. From boyhood. We were raised almost as brothers until he defied the family by choosing the church over the military or law. Sir William gestured to a nearby settee. Please, sit. Let me tell you about your father and the family you never knew existed. For the next half hour, Sir William shared stories of his cousin William, Rose's father, describing a young man of intelligence and conviction who had chosen love and vocation over family expectations and potential fortune. He never regretted his choice, Sir William assured her. His letters spoke of complete happiness with your mother and you, but I always regretted the family's rejection of him. I tried to maintain our connection through correspondence, but distances and duties made it difficult. And after my parents died, Rose asked, you truly searched for me. For nearly 2 years, he confirmed. But governess positions rarely make the social columns, and you left no forwarding address with the school in Bath. Eventually, I had to accept that you might not wish to be found. That perhaps you blamed the family for abandoning your father. I never knew there was family to blame, Rose said softly. I thought I was alone in the world. Sir William's expression grew pained. That knowledge haunts me. To think of my cousin's child believing herself without kin, when I would have welcomed you as my own daughter. And now, why has the Duke brought you here? He said he wished to correct a misunderstanding, that you believed yourself without family connections that might ease your acceptance into society. Sir William studied her face. I gather from the child's outburst that there is more to the story. Rose felt her cheeks warm. His Grace and I, That is, during our stay in Devon, certain feelings developed that we both recognized could lead nowhere, given the differences in our stations. Ah, Sir William's eyes twinkled. And my noble connection provides a convenient bridge across that particular chasm. Something like that, Rose admitted, though I never imagined. That is, even with family connections, a governess is hardly a suitable match for a duke. Perhaps not, under ordinary circumstances. But these are hardly ordinary circumstances, are they? Sir William leaned forward. The Duke has gone to extraordinary lengths to locate your family, my dear. Such effort suggests his feelings run uncommonly deep. Even so, you fear society's reaction. Sir William nodded, understanding. I won't pretend it would be an easy path. But with family to stand behind you, with a connection, however distant, to the Earl of Westmoreland, the worst of the scandal would be mitigated. And you would stand behind me. Acknowledge me as your niece. My dear child, I would be honored to do so. Sir William's voice roughened with emotion. Indeed, now that I've found you, I intend to legally adopt you as my daughter, if you'll permit it. I have no son to carry on the Kincaid name, and Diana is married to Lord Thornton. You would be my heir. Rose stared at him in disbelief. Your heir, but we've only just met. You are my blood, the daughter of the man who was more brother than cousin to me. The connection was forged long before this meeting. He hesitated. Unless, of course, you find the idea repellent, I would understand if you preferred your independence. No, that is. Rose struggled to organize her thoughts. I'm overwhelmed, sir. A month ago, I was a governess with no family, no connections, no prospects beyond my position. Now you speak of adoption, of inheritance, and the Duke speaks of possibilities I had convinced myself could never exist. Sir William smiled gently. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Just when we believe we understand our path, everything changes. Indeed it does, Rose agreed, thinking of how completely her world had been upended since arriving at Thornfield. But I confess, I don't know what to think. What to feel. Then perhaps we should join the others for dinner, and you can take time to consider everything you've learned. Sir William rose, offering his arm. Whatever you decide, about the adoption or the Duke, know that you have family now, Rose. You are not alone. Rose took his arm, blinking back unexpected tears. Thank you, uncle, she said, testing the word that felt both foreign and right. Dinner passed in a blur of conversation, with Priya asking countless questions about India, where both Sir William and Lady Diana had lived, and Lady Diana sharing stories of London society that had Rose alternating between laughter and apprehension. The Duke observed it all with quiet satisfaction, occasionally catching Rose's eye with a gaze that held both question and hope. After Priya had been sent to bed, the adults gathered in the library for tea. Lady Diana skillfully steered the conversation toward Rose's education and accomplishments, expressing genuine admiration for her mastery of languages and her dedication to teaching. You would adapt to society far more easily than many born to it, she declared. Breeding shows in behavior, not merely bloodlines. And you, dear cousin, have the natural dignity that no amount of money or titles can purchase. You're very kind, Rose murmured, uncomfortable with the praise. Not kind, merely honest. Lady Diana glanced at the Duke. Don't you agree, Your Grace? Completely, he replied without hesitation. Rose would grace any position society might offer. The directness of his gaze, the implication of his words, made Rose's pulse quicken. She was saved from having to respond by Sir William, who tactfully changed the subject to his plans for returning to London the following week. Diana and I would be honored if you would consider visiting us there, Rose, he added. Our home is yours whenever you wish it. Thank you, Rose said sincerely. Perhaps when Priya's education allows for a break, I might do so. Or sooner, if circumstances change, Lady Diana suggested with a meaningful glance at the Duke. Shortly afterward, Sir William declared himself fatigued from travel, and he and his daughter retired to their chambers, leaving Rose alone with